My name is Marcus Rodriguez, and I'm about to tell you the most dangerous story of my life, how I, as sheriff of Paso Verde County, Texas, managed to steal $34 million from the most ruthless drug cartel in Mexico, convinced the DEA that I was their greatest ally in the war on drugs, and nearly got away with what would have been the perfect crime. What I'm about to share with you is a confession that could still get me killed, even 5 years after everything went down. This story begins in the summer of 2018, when I was 42 years old and had been sheriff of Paso Verde County for 8 years. Our county sits right on the Texas-Mexico border, about 60 miles west of El Paso, and if you're looking for a place where drugs, money, and violence intersect on a daily basis, you couldn't find a better location. Paso Verde County has a population of about 38,000 people spread across 2,400 square miles of desert, ranches, and small border towns. We have 3 official border crossings and probably 50 unofficial ones that the cartels use regularly. My department consisted of 24 deputies, 6 detectives, and me, not nearly enough to effectively patrol such a vast area, especially when you're dealing with organizations that have unlimited money and military-grade weapons. Sheriff Rodriguez said Agent Sarah Mitchell when she first walked into my office in June 2018. I'm with the DEA's El Paso division, and we need to talk. Agent Mitchell was about 35, blonde, sharp-eyed, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that comes from federal training and a badge that opens doors. She'd driven down from El Paso specifically to meet with me about what she called enhanced cooperation opportunities. What kind of cooperation? Agent Mitchell: we're launching Operation Desert Shielder, major initiative targeting the Hermanos Negros Cartel's operations along this section of the border. The Hermanos Negros, the Black Brothers, were one of the most violent and sophisticated drug organizations operating between Mexico and Texas, run by 2 actual brothers, Carlos and Miguel Herrera. They controlled everything from drug trafficking to human smuggling to money laundering across hundreds of miles of border territory. We know the Hermanos Negros move significant quantities of drugs and cash through your county. Agent Mitchell continued. We also know they've been expanding their operations here over the past 2 years. That's correct, I confirmed. We've seen increased activity, more violence, and definitely more money changing hands. Chef Rodriguez, we want to embed 2 DEA agents in your department as special deputies. They'd work directly with you on cartel-related cases and help coordinate with our larger investigation. What's in it for Paso Verde County? Federal funding, equipment upgrades, and most importantly, when we take down the Hermanos Negros, your department gets a significant percentage of all seized assets. This last point got my attention. Asset forfeiture in drug cases could mean millions of dollars for local law enforcement money that could transform a small, underfunded sheriff's department. How significant is significant? Potentially 20 to 30% of everything we seize. Based on our intelligence, that could mean several $1 million for your department. Agent Mitchell, you've got my attention. Excellent. I'll have the paperwork processed within a week. What Agent Mitchell didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I had been planning something like this for months. Not cooperation with the D, but something far more dangerous and infinitely more profitable. You see, by June 2018, I had been fighting the war on drugs for 8 years and watching it destroy my community, while making only the cartels and the federal government richer. My deputies were outgunned, outmanned, and underpaid. Our equipment was outdated, our vehicles were falling apart, and every month I had to explain to the county commissioners why we couldn't do more with less. Meanwhile, I watched the Hermanos Negros move tens of millions of dollars through my county every year, while my department struggled to afford basic supplies. Marcus, my wife Alina, had said to me one evening in May, "How long are you going to keep fighting a war you can't win? What choice do I have? You could retire. Take that security job with the oil company in Houston. We could have a normal life." Alina, I've been sheriff for 8 years. This is who I am. No, Marcus, this is what you do. It's not who you are. Alina was right, but she didn't understand the full picture. The truth was, I had been studying the Hermanos Negros for years, not just their drug operations, but their financial systems, their cash storage methods, their transportation routes, and most importantly, their vulnerabilities. The Hermanos Negros, like most major cartels, had a critical weakness. They generated far more cash than they could efficiently launder. This meant they had to store enormous amounts of physical currency in hidden locations, move it periodically, and constantly worry about theft from rivals, law enforcement, or their own people. Through careful surveillance and informants, I had identified 3 major cash storage facilities. The Hermanos Negros operated in Paso Verde County. The largest was in an abandoned ranch house about 40 miles from the border, where they typically kept between $20 and $40 million at any given time. "Sheriff," said Detective Ray Morales, my most trusted officer, during a private conversation in April 2018, "I've been thinking about the Hermanos Negros situation. What about it? What if there was a way to hit them where it really hurts? Not just arrest a few dealers or seize a truckload of drugs, but actually damage their operation." "Ray, what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that sometimes the only way to fight fire is with fire." Ray had been my deputy for 6 years and had seen his own brother killed by cartel violence in 2016. He understood, like I did, that traditional law enforcement methods weren't working against organizations with unlimited resources. "Ray, let me ask you something, hypothetically. If you knew where the Hermanos Negros stored their money, and if you knew when that location would be most vulnerable, what would you do?" "Hypothetically, I'd take it all and use it to actually fight crime effectively, even if it meant breaking the law ourselves. Marcus, they've been breaking the law for years and getting richer every day. Meanwhile, good people suffer and die because we don't have the resources to protect them." That conversation was the beginning of what would become the most audacious theft in border law enforcement history. Over the next 2 months, Ray and I carefully developed a plan that would accomplish 3 objectives: steal the Hermanos Negros cash reserves, make it look like the work of a rival cartel, and position ourselves as heroes in the DEA's investigation of the theft. The plan required precise timing, detailed intelligence, and most importantly, the ability to convincingly play the role of innocent law enforcement officers investigating a crime we had actually committed. "Sheriff Rodriguez," Agent Mitchell said when she returned to my office a week later with the cooperation agreement, "I have to say, your department's intelligence on cartel operations in this area is impressive. We've been fighting these guys for years, Agent Mitchell. We know their patterns. Well, that knowledge is going to be invaluable to our operation. When can we get started?" "Immediately," I said, signing the agreement that would give me cover for the biggest theft of my career. What Agent Mitchell couldn't have known was that by partnering with me, the D was essentially hiring the fox to guard the hen house. I would have access to all their intelligence, their operational plans, their surveillance schedules, and most importantly, advance warning of any raids or investigations that might interfere with my own plans. "Sheriff," Agent Mitchell said as she prepared to leave, "I want you to know that the D considers you one of our most valuable partners in this region. Your integrity and dedication to fighting the cartels is exactly what we need." "Thank you, Agent Mitchell. I'm committed to doing whatever it takes to stop these criminals." And I was committed, just not in the way she thought. That night, I met with Ray at a remote location outside town to finalize our plan. "Marcus, are you absolutely sure about this? Once we cross this line, there's no going back." "Ray, we've been fighting a war with one hand tied behind our backs for years. It's time to level the playing field. When do we move?" "Next week." The D thinks they're getting a cooperative local sheriff. Instead, they're going to get front row seats to the crime of the century. And if we get caught, we won't get caught, Ray, because when this is over, we won't just be the thieves, we'll be the lead investigators on the case. The irony was perfect. The D would spend months working with me to investigate a crime that I had committed, never suspecting that their most trusted local partner was actually the mastermind they were hunting. As I drove home that night, I thought about Elena's words. She was right, being sheriff was what I did, not who I was. But after next week, I would be something entirely different, a criminal who looked like a hero, a thief who wore a badge, and a man who had finally found a way to win an unwinnable war. The only question was whether I could pull it off without getting myself, Ray, or my family killed in the process. In 5 days, I would steal $34 million from the most dangerous criminals in North America, and convince the federal government that I was their greatest ally in the fight against organized crime. It was the perfect plan. Almost. July 15th, 2018, at 3:47 a.m. I committed the largest theft in the history of border law enforcement, but to understand how I pulled it off, you need to understand exactly how the Hermanos Negros operated their cash storage system, and how I used the DEA's own intelligence gathering to perfect my crime. Sheriff Rodriguez, Agent Mitchell had said during our briefing 3 days earlier, we've identified what we believe is a major cash storage facility approximately 43 miles northeast of the border, the old Ramirez Ranch. I asked, though I already knew the answer. That's correct. Our surveillance indicates they're storing significant amounts of currency there, possibly in the tens of millions. What's our timeline for moving on it? That's the problem. We need more intelligence before we can get a warrant. Could take weeks, maybe months. Agent Mitchell, weeks or months gives them time to move the money. These guys aren't stupid. They rotate their storage locations regularly. I understand your concern, Sheriff, but we need to build an airtight case. What Agent Mitchell didn't know was that I had been watching the Ramirez Ranch for over a year. I knew their security protocols, their personnel schedules, and most importantly, I knew they were planning to move the money on July 18th, just 3 days after I planned to steal it. The Hermanos Negros kept their cash in a sophisticated underground storage facility they had built beneath the ranch house's foundation. The entrance was hidden under a false floor in what used to be the kitchen, and the chamber itself was reinforced concrete lined with moisture control and security systems. Ray, I said, during our final planning meeting on July 14th, let's review the timeline one more time. 3:30 a.m., we disabled the security system using the backdoor access code that Luis provided. Luis Martinez was a former Hermanos Negros accountant who had been feeding me information for 6 months in exchange for protection from a federal money laundering charge. He didn't know what I was planning to do with his intelligence, but his information had been invaluable. 3:35 a.m. We neutralized the 2 guards using non-lethal methods. 3:40 a.m. We access the storage chamber and begin removing the cash. 4:15 a.m. We're gone with everything we can carry. 4:30 a.m. We're at the secondary location transferring the money to permanent storage. And then we go home, sleep for a few hours, and report to work like nothing happened. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity and the fact that we would be the ones investigating our own crime. When the theft was discovered, I would be the sheriff called to the scene. I would control the investigation, the evidence collection, and most importantly, the narrative about what had happened at 3:15 a.m. on July 15th. Ray and I drove to the Ramirez Ranch in an unmarked vehicle with stolen license plates. We wore dark clothing, night vision goggles, and carried equipment that could disable electronic security systems or items that my sheriff's department had legitimate reasons to possess. "Marcus, guards are in position, as expected," Ray whispered, as we approached the ranch house. 2 men, one in the main house, one in the outer building. Luce's intelligence about the security system. Accurate. I can access the main panel from here. The Hermanos Negros security system was sophisticated but not impenetrable, especially when you had the access codes and knew exactly what you were dealing with. Within 5 minutes, Ray had disabled all cameras, motion sensors, and alarms. Guards, handled, both unconscious but alive. They'll wake up with headaches but no permanent damage. I wasn't a killer, and I wasn't interested in creating unnecessary victims. The goal was theft, not murder. And leaving living witnesses actually served our purposes better than bodies would have. The underground storage chamber was exactly as Luis had described it, a concrete bunker accessible through a hidden entrance in the kitchen floor. But what Luis hadn't adequately conveyed was the sheer amount of money stored there. "Jesus Christ, Marcus," Ray whispered when we got our first look inside the chamber. "There's got to be $50 million here." The money was stored in waterproof containers, organized by denomination and origin. There were stacks of hundreds, 50s, and 20s, all vacuum sealed and labeled with codes that indicated which operations had generated the cash. "We stick to the plan," I said. "We take what we can carry efficiently and leave the rest." We had brought specially designed duffel bags that could each hold approximately $2 million in hundreds. Over the next 30 minutes, we loaded 17 bags with $34 million every $100 bill in the facility. "Why leave the smaller denominations?" Ray asked. "Because 34 million in hundreds weighs about 750 pounds and fits in our vehicle. The rest would require a truck, more time, and more risk. And because leaving money behind makes it look like we were interrupted or couldn't carry more." Exactly. If we had taken everything, it would suggest professional thieves with extensive resources. Taking only the hundreds suggests opportunistic criminals working under time pressure. By 4:20 a.m., we were driving away from the ranch with $34 million in the back of our vehicle. The entire operation had taken less than an hour, and we had left behind evidence that would point investigators in completely the wrong direction. Marcus, where exactly are we taking this money? Somewhere the D will never think to look. The permanent storage location I had chosen was perfect in its audacity. An abandoned mineshaft on federal land that was officially under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Land Management, but was practically never visited by anyone. I had spent months preparing the site, installing waterproof storage containers, and creating a concealment system that would keep the money safe from both the elements and discovery. More importantly, the location was on land that I, as sheriff, had legitimate reasons to patrol and visit. At 6:30 a.m., after securing the money and destroying all evidence of our involvement, Ray and I reported to work as usual. At 8:15 a.m., my phone rang. "Sheriff Rodriguez, this is Agent Mitchell. We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" "The Ramirez ranch was hit sometime last night. Multiple millions in cartel money stolen." "Jesus, any injuries?" "2 guards were found unconscious but alive. They're claiming they don't remember anything after about 3:30 a.m. Sounds like a professional job. What do you need from my department?" "We need you to secure the scene and begin preliminary investigation. This could be connected to our larger operation." "Of course, Agent Mitchell. My team will be there within the hour." And so began the most elaborate deception of my law enforcement career. For the next 6 months, I would be the lead local investigator on my own crime, working directly with the D to solve a case that I had orchestrated from beginning to end. "Sheriff Rodriguez," Agent Mitchell said when I arrived at the ranch that morning, "what's your initial assessment?" "Professional job. Definitely. They knew exactly what they were doing. Disabled security, neutralized guards without killing them, went straight to the money. Any theories about who might be responsible? Could be a rival cartel, could be former employees, could be independent operators who got lucky with intelligence. The Hermanos Negros are claiming they lost over $60 million. They always inflate the numbers. Agent Mitchell makes them look like bigger victims and puts more pressure on us to recover their money. What I was really doing was managing the investigation to ensure it would never lead back to me. Every piece of evidence was analyzed through my department. Every witness interview was conducted with my participation. Every theory about the crime was filtered through my interpretation. "Sheriff," said Detective Morales, "during our first official case meeting, the security footage shows the system was disabled from the inside using legitimate access codes, which means either an inside job or someone with extensive intelligence about their operations. The Hermanos Negros are convinced it was lost," Serpiente's Agent Mitchell added, referring to a rival cartel. "They're already talking about retaliation." "That works in our favor," I said. "If the cartels are focused on fighting each other, they're not looking at us." Over the following weeks, I carefully steered the investigation toward dead ends and false leads. Every time the D developed a theory that might lead back to the truth, I found ways to discredit it or redirect their attention. "Agent Mitchell, I've been thinking about the timeline," I said during one of our weekly briefings. "The thieves were in and out in under an hour, which suggests they had inside information about guard schedules and security protocols. That's consistent with our thinking. We're focusing on current and former Hermanos Negros employees. What about the possibility that this was Los Serpientes using inside intelligence they purchased? You think they bought information from someone inside the Hermanos Negros organization? It would explain how they knew exactly when and how to strike. By suggesting that the theft was the result of cartel and cartel warfare rather than law enforcement involvement, I was directing the investigation away from any scenario that might implicate legitimate police officers. 3 months after the theft, Agent Mitchell called me with an update that confirmed my strategy was working perfectly. "Sheriff Rodriguez, I wanted to let you know that our investigation has identified several potential suspects, all connected to Los Serpientes. Any arrests imminent?" "Not yet, but we're building cases. The Hermanos Negros have been remarkably cooperative with our investigation." "Cooperative how?" "They're providing intelligence about Los Serpientes operations, helping us understand cartel financial structures. even offering to assist with controlled operations. This was the most beautiful irony of all. By stealing from the Hermanos Negros, I had turned them into cooperative witnesses in a federal investigation. They were so eager to get their money back and punish whoever had stolen it that they were essentially working for the DEA. Agent Mitchell, has there been any consideration that this theft might be part of a larger pattern? What do you mean? If Los Serpientes successfully stole $34 million from the Hermanos Negros, they're probably planning similar operations against other targets. That's an interesting theory, Sheriff. We should definitely be prepared for additional thefts. And so I planted the seed for my next operation, because $34 million was just the beginning. By December 2018, 5 months after the Ramirez ranch theft, I had successfully convinced the DEA that I was their most valuable asset in the war against cartel money laundering. What they didn't know was that I was already planning my second major theft, and that my first theft had generated consequences far more dangerous than I had anticipated. Sheriff Rodriguez, Agent Mitchell said during what I didn't know would be our final meeting, "I have news that's going to change everything." What kind of news? We've identified the person responsible for the Ramirez ranch theft. My heart stopped, but I kept my expression neutral. That's excellent news, Agent Mitchell. Who was it? Miguel Herrera himself. I stared at her. Miguel Herrera, as in co-leader of the Hermanos Negros. That's correct. Our investigation revealed that Miguel orchestrated the theft of his own organization's money as part of a power struggle with his brother Carlos. This was not what I had expected. How did you determine that? Financial forensics, communication intercepts, and intelligence from sources inside the organization. Miguel has been skimming money for months and finally decided to take everything he could carry. Where is Miguel now? Dead. Carlos had him killed 3 weeks ago when he discovered the theft. Agent Mitchell showed me photographs of Miguel Herrera's body, which had been found in a remote area of Chihuahua with clear signs of torture. Agent Mitchell, if Miguel Herrera stole the money, where is it now? That's what we're trying to determine. Our working theory is that he hid it somewhere before Carlos discovered his involvement. For the first time since this entire operation began, I felt genuine fear. The DEA had concluded that Miguel Herrera was responsible for my crime, which meant they would be searching for money that Miguel couldn't have hidden because he had never possessed it. Sheriff Rodriguez, we need your department's help searching every property Miguel Herrera might have had access to in Paso Verde County. Of course. Do you have a list of potential locations? We're developing one now. But Sheriff, I want you to understand something. If we can recover this money, it will be the biggest asset forfeiture in DEA history for this region, and my department's share would be potentially $8 to $10 million, assuming we recover the full amount. The irony was staggering. The DEA was offering to pay me millions of dollars to help them find money that I had already stolen and hidden. Agent Mitchell, I'll mobilize every resource my department has. Excellent. And Sheriff, there's something else. What's the intelligence division wants to offer you a position as a regional consultant on cartel financial operations. The salary would be significant, and you'd be working directly with federal agencies across the Southwest. She was offering me my dream job, federal position with real resources to fight organized crime based on my perceived success in investigating a crime I had committed. That's an incredible opportunity, Agent Mitchell. You've earned it, Sheriff. Your work on this case has been exemplary. After Agent Mitchell left my office that day, I sat alone for 2 hours trying to process what had just happened. The DEA believed Miguel Herrera was responsible for my crime, which meant they would never suspect me, but it also meant they would be searching for money that didn't exist in any location Miguel could have accessed. "Marcus," said Detective Morales when he came into my office that evening, "we need to talk." "About what?" "About the fact that Miguel Herrera didn't steal that money." My blood ran cold. "Ray, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that Miguel Herrera was in federal custody in El Paso on July 15th. He couldn't have been at the Ramirez ranch because he was being interrogated by ICE agents about human trafficking charges." "How do you know that?" "Because I checked. Marcus, Miguel Herrera has an alibi for the night of the theft." "Does the DEA know this?" "Not yet, but they will when they run a comprehensive background check on his whereabouts." I realized I had a serious problem. The DEA's theory about Miguel Herrera was about to collapse, which meant they would start looking for alternative explanations. "Ray, what do you think we should do?" I think we should disappear that money and get as far away from this situation as possible. What do you mean? I mean take our share and run. Marcus, leave the country, start over somewhere else, and never look back. Ray, I can't just abandon my life here. Marcus, when the DEA realizes Miguel Herrera couldn't have committed this theft, they're going to start looking at everyone who had access to intelligence about the Ramirez ranch. That includes us. Ray was right, but I wasn't ready to accept that my plan had failed. What if we could redirect their investigation again? How? What if we could make it look like the real thieves were Los Serpientes operatives who have since been killed by the Hermanos Negros? Marcus, that would require creating false evidence and manipulating a federal investigation. We're already manipulating a federal investigation. This is different. This is active obstruction of justice, not just misdirection. But I was already developing a plan. Over the next week, I carefully planted evidence suggesting that 3 Los Serpientes operatives all of whom had been killed in unrelated cartel violence, had been responsible for the Ramirez ranch theft. Agent Mitchell, I called her on December 18th. I think we've had a breakthrough in the case. What kind of breakthrough? We've identified 3 Los Serpientes operatives who were in the area on July 15th and who had connections to former Hermanos Negros employees. Are they available for questioning? Unfortunately, all 3 were killed in cartel violence over the past 4 months. How convenient for them. But Agent Mitchell, I think we can build a circumstantial case that these 3 were responsible for the theft, based on what evidence, financial records, communication intercepts, and witness testimony placing them in the area. What I was really doing was fabricating evidence to support a false theory, but I was confident I could make it convincing enough to close the case permanently. However, I had underestimated Agent Mitchell's investigative skills. Sheriff Rodriguez, she said when she came to my office 3 days later, we need to discuss some inconsistencies in your evidence. What kind of inconsistencies? The financial records you provided about the Los Serpientes operatives don't match federal databases. The communication intercepts you referenced don't exist in D files, and the witnesses you cited have no record of providing any statements. I felt my carefully constructed deception beginning to collapse. Agent Mitchell, I can explain those discrepancies. I'm sure you can, Sheriff. But first, I need to ask you about something else. What? I need to ask you about your whereabouts on the night of July 15th. You're investigating me. I'm investigating everyone who had access to intelligence about the Ramirez Ranch operation. Agent Mitchell, I was home with my wife that night. Your wife has already confirmed that you left the house at approximately 3 a.m. and didn't return until 5:30 a.m. Elena, my own wife, had provided the D with information that contradicted my alibi. I received a call about a domestic disturbance and had to respond. There's no record of any domestic disturbance calls that night. Sheriff Agent Mitchell, what exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that you and Detective Morales stole $34 million from the Hermanos Negros and that you've been manipulating this investigation from the beginning to avoid detection. The room was completely silent for several minutes. Do you have any evidence to support that theory? We have enough evidence to arrest both you and Detective Morales. Then why haven't you? Because we want the money back, Sheriff, and we're hoping you'll cooperate. Agent Mitchell leaned forward in her chair. Marcus, you're not a career criminal. You're a law enforcement officer who made some very bad decisions. If you cooperate with us, if you help us recover the money, we can work with prosecutors to minimize the consequences. What kind of consequences are we talking about? Without cooperation, federal charges for theft, racketeering, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. You're looking at 25 to 30 years in federal prison, and with cooperation, possibly 5 to 8 years, depending on how much money we recover. I thought about Elena, about my 2 children, about the life I had built over 20 years in law enforcement. Agent Mitchell, I need time to think about this. You have 24 hours, Sheriff. After that, we arrest you and Detective Morales, regardless of whether you cooperate. That night, I went home to Elena and told her everything. The theft, the deception, the federal investigation, and the choice I now faced. Marcus, she said, after I finished explaining, how could you do this to our family? I thought I could win Elena. I thought I could beat the system that's been beating us for years. And now I've destroyed everything we built together. What are you going to do? I'm going to cooperate with the DE. I'm going to return the money and accept whatever punishment they give me, even if it means prison. Even if it means prison. The next morning, I called Agent Mitchell and agreed to cooperate fully. Ray and I led DEA agents to the mine shaft where we had hidden the $34 million. Every dollar was recovered intact. I pled guilty to federal charges and was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Ray received a similar sentence. The money was returned to, well, officially it was declared recovered federal evidence, but I suspect much of it eventually made its way back to cartel operations through channels I'll never understand. Alina divorced me while I was in prison. My children were told that their father was serving time for financial crimes, but never learned the full details of what I had done. I was released in 2023 after serving 4.5 years. I now work as a security consultant for a private company in Phoenix, making about $40,000 a year less than I made as a deputy 20 years ago. Agent Mitchell retired from the D and wrote a book about the case called The Sheriff's Gambit. She never mentioned my name in the book, but anyone familiar with the case knows who she's writing about. The Hermanos Negros Cartel. They're still operating, still moving drugs and money across the border, still destroying communities like PASO Verde County. My theft of $34 million didn't even slow them down. So what did I accomplish? I destroyed my career, my marriage, and my family's future. I became exactly the kind of corrupt official I had spent years fighting against. And I learned that there are no winners in the war on drugs, only different categories of losers. The money is gone, the badge is gone, and the life I built over 45 years is gone. But I'm still alive, which is more than Miguel Herrera can say. Sometimes that has to be enough. The end. Disclaimer. This story is completely fictional and created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real persons, law enforcement agencies, or events is purely coincidental.